Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing a build request. Now, this is a bit of a cool one actually. I was asked to make a build that focuses on fire and lightning. Now, that is fairly standard to do in most cases. You just grab a blaster caster that can use both damage types as spells, and you're pretty much good to go. But I think I found a really interesting combination of classes and items that are going to create a super unique playstyle that fully utilizes both elements in an extremely fun way and creates combinations that I don't think you guys would ever have expected. So I really hope you stick around for this one because this is awesome. Anyways, I'm not going to waste too much time. Let's get straight into the build. We're going to be kicking things off as a Cleric, specifically a Tempest Domain Cleric. Now, the main reason I've gone with Tempest Domain is because it's going to give us it's going to give us access to all weapons and all armor, which is going to be important for this build. But it's also going to get us some cool things, such as our cantrips, that being resistance, guidance, and produce flame, just as an alternative to sacred flame. So we can get that one, the fire damage cantrip for a fire build, which is nice. But we also have thaumaturgy already because I've gone with a Zariel Tiefling, and I recommend you do this too, just because I quite like the theming, but it's entirely up to you. I've even gone for like a fire and ice look with like the design, like if you look at the fiery hair with like the streaks of blue and like on the horns and the eyes, I think it looks really cool. But anyways, but the other thing we're going to get from Tempest Domain that I super want is the subclass feature Wrath of the Storm, allowing us to use our reaction to deal an extra bit of lightning or thunder damage when we are attacked. We're not going to be using our reaction for much else with this build, so it felt like a really awesome kind of on-theme counter attack that we get for free at level 1, as well as everything else that I want, which I think is pretty good. Next up for our deity, you can take whoever you like. I've just gone with Talos because he's got a lightning bolt on him and he's kind of like chaotic, so I feel like for lightning and fire that kind of works. But take whatever you like here. I'm sure somebody will tell me there's a much better option. And as for your stats, we've got Dexterity at 16 because that's going to be our main attacking stat, Constitution at 14 because it's a decent chunk of health, Wisdom at 16 because that's going to be our main spell casting stat, and Charisma at 12 just so we have that option. As for our skill proficiencies, we have Animal Handling and Survival from our background because I went with Folk Hero, because I believe this would be a I kind of saw this character as being a high-ranking Knight of the Immortal Flame in Baldur's Gate, you know, kind of the Flaming Fist, I mean. And I feel like they kind of have a kind of notoriety among the people of Baldur's Gate as being an extremely adept wielder of fire in order to, you know, protect the city. They're one of, like, the top guards. And as such, when they were kidnapped, they kind of have to, like, work their way back up. So I feel like this is a very heroic character, so that's why I went for Folk Hero, but it's entirely up to you. And I've chosen Insight and Persuasion as our proficiencies. Oh, goodness me. Hello? I don't know why you're so close to the camera. I normally cut this bit out, but I might leave that in. Next up, we are gonna go with Cleric 2. Now, you can take these levels in any order you like. You can multi-class straight away if you want, and I would probably recommend that. But I'm just going to be showing the levels that we're going to be taking in order of, like, class. So, but like I say, change up these levels however you like. So at Cleric level 2, we're going to be getting the obvious thing, that being our Channel Divinity Charge, and our subclass feature that everyone knows, Destructive Wrath. When you roll thunder or lightning damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead. This isn't as important for this build, as we're not really going to be casting big lightning spells like Lightning Bolt or Call Lightning. But if you wanted to go with this anyway, just to get that little bit of extra damage on that one bit of lightning damage that you're going to be doing, you can. Although I can absolutely see you dropping this level for an extra level in our main class if you like. But I like to have even numbers in my levels, so I'm going to be taking a second level of Cleric here. This also means we're going to be able to prepare some spells, and while I don't know if there's anything that's necessarily on theme here, there's a few things we can grab. The main thing obviously being Create or Destroy Water to make enemies vulnerable to lightning. However, since we are also using fire damage, making our enemies wet, yes, it makes them vulnerable to lightning, but it also makes them resistant to fire. So you kind of have to weigh your options as to whether or not you want to do this, but it's not exactly a bad shake to have the option. But we can also go with things like Cure Wounds and Healing Wounds. I feel like a guard who is a cleric would have basic healing magic on hand to act as a paramedic in Baldur's Gate, Sanctuary to be able to protect yourselves, and I would say Shield of Faith for the exact same reason, although a guard using Command would absolutely make sense as well, but I feel it doesn't feel very heroic in my opinion, so we'll skip it for now. Next up, we're going to be jumping into our main class, and this one might surprise you. We're actually going to go with Monk. Even though this is a build that wears armor, the only thing that we're really going to be missing out on is the unarmored movement. Everything else we could get from Monk is something that we absolutely want. Yes, we don't get the unarmored movement, and that is a downside, but we are absolutely going to make up for that, and we don't need our unarmored defense as much, although there are clothing options that I'm going to recommend for the early stages of this build that you can absolutely use if you so choose. With this, though, we are going to be getting our Flurry of Blows, which is going to be a really solid bonus action attack for us. And again, while we're not really going to be making much use of out of most of the features here, we are going to be getting Dexterous Attacks, allowing us to use Monk weapons, and our Unarmed Strikes becoming a 1d4, which is going to be super good for this build. So overall, we do want the basic features of Monk, but we're mainly here for some stuff we get later. At Monk level 2, we're going to be getting the ability to use Patient Defense and our Step of the Wind abilities. Now, normally I kind of gloss over these as they're not really going to be that important in the long run, but actually for this build, Step of the Wind Dash is going to be a super powerful early game option, and you will see why as we get into the equipment later. We're going to be getting a better version of this later on in the build, but as an early game option, this is something you absolutely want to be using. At Monk level 3, we're going to be picking our subclass, and this is probably fairly obvious, but we are going to be going with the Way of the Four Elements. This is going to give us a few things. Number 1 being Harmony of Fire and Water. While not in combat, you can regain half your key points rounded down once per long rest. Pretty good feature. It's going to allow your monk to go on even longer. Now, as for our Disciple of the Elements spells, we have a few options, but there's one you absolutely need to take, and is the cornerstone of this build, and that is the Fangs of the Fire Snake. Hit your foe from afar. Your next melee attack deals an additional 1 to 4 fire damage. This will do your unarmed damage in addition to 1d10 fire damage to an enemy, and it counts as an attack, meaning it will trigger extra attack. So that means you can immediately use that additional bonus fire damage on your next weapon attack, because we are using weapons with this build primarily, meaning that you're going to be able to give your attacks a serious buff while continuing to keep up the pressure with powerful ranged attacks. And of course, sticking on the theme of lightning, we could also grab Shocking Grasp here, but I'm actually going to focus on Sphere of the Elemental Balance, because that is a ranged attack that is going to allow us to use a fire version, which will allow us to create fire surfaces, or cast a lightning version that will let us cast electrified surfaces, so worth picking up. And then another thing you could do is grab maybe something like Water Whip to pull enemies towards you. Thunder Wave, or Fist of the Four Thunders, I should say. Like I said, Shocking Grasp is also an option. But I'm actually going to recommend Blade of Rime, because, well, since we're getting Fire and Lightning, let's just get some Ice on top of it as well. Because there's an interesting synergy with this. If you cast Blade of Rime, yes, you're getting more damage coverage, being Piercing and Cold, which is good. But then also, if you use your fire attacks later on, you can melt that ice, turning it into water, allowing you to make electrified surfaces after that with our electric attacks. So, it's actually kind of nice to have that extra bit of utility, but take whatever you like here. Hell, you could even make an ice cube. I've wanted to make a build around this entire feature, because I thought you could pick up the ice and throw it, but you can't, which sucks. But, oh well. At Monk level 4, we're going to be grabbing our first feat. And now, initially, I went with a strength version of this build, picking up Tavern Brawler, and while there will be options for you to do that later on as we kind of get into the equipment, as I'll go over some things there, I mainly want to take an ability score improvement, because I do believe just bumping up our dex here is the strongest thing we can do, and we're a little bit limited on our ability score improvements, so we want to take as much as we can. But I will go into a Tavern Brawler variant of the build kind of towards the end of this video. Next up at Monk level 5, we're going to be getting our extra attack. We absolutely want this completely. It's going to be one of the most important things of our build. Like I say, it synergizes with Fangs of the Fire Snake really, really well. So worth going to level 5 of Monk for this. And next up at Monk level 6, which is going to be our final level of Monk, we're going to be able to get a few things, including some additional ki, our ki empowered strikes, allowing our unarmed strikes to overcome resistance and immunity to non-magical damage, which is good. We're also going to get an extra Disciple of the Elements spell, and I'm obviously going to be taking Embrace of the Inferno here to be able to get a nice, decent ranged attack, which is basically Scorching Ray. However, we're not going to be hitting the level cap, which causes all of our spells to boost in power, so if you want to pick something that doesn't require that, like it doesn't actually get stronger at level 9, then go with something else, but I feel like just having this as a utility option to perhaps quickly pick off some low health enemies is a super good idea, and again, it's on theme. Now, as I said, we are going to be leaving Monk here for our final multi-class, and I feel like this is a pretty obvious pick, but we are going with Thief Rogue. This is going to get us sneak attack, and we are going to be using a finesse weapon with the primary version of this build, so it's absolutely worth picking this up, as it is free extra damage in the situations where it is applicable. We can also grab some extra skill proficiencies here, and I'm gonna say it really is up to you, depending on what you want. I feel like, again, if you were a guard, going with like intimidation would be nice, and maybe bumping that up. And then you could also grab something like expertise in persuasion to really be able to bump up your ability checks with dialogue. So yeah, I feel like that's pretty good. At Rogue level 2, we're going to be able to now dash as a bonus action without needing to spend a key point. Super key part of the build, and we absolutely want to pick this up. At Rogue level 3, we're going to be choosing our subclass, and of course we're going with the Thief. That extra bonus action on Monk is absolutely busted. We also are going to get resistance to falling damage, but we're mainly here for that extra bonus action attack. And finally, at Rogue level 4, we are going to be able to choose a feat, and I want to grab another ability score improvement to bump up our dexterity to the maximum, meaning that we're going to have decent stats all around the board, and as such, we'll also be able to make the most out of our weapon attacks, such as Fangs of the Fire Snake. Can we back that camera up? Okay. That is the build. So what you're going to be getting out of this build is a super fast, super mobile fighter, which is able to deal a lot of damage of different varieties, and is able to buff their weapon attacks with our main cornerstone, the Fangs of the Fire Snake. And while we only have 7 key points, again, these recharge on a short rest, and we also have Harmony of Fire and Water, so we aren't exactly going to be short for key points in the long run, and you will just be able to absolutely shred your opponents when the opportunity arises. But why go to all this trouble with Monk? Surely we could pick something like Warlock, or Fighter, or even Paladin and get better results, right? Well, here's the thing. Our equipment is going to give us an extremely unique combination of abilities, spells, and, attacks that is going to create a super unique playstyle for us, so let's get into that. Now, there's a lot of variance with this build. Please ignore the stuff up the top. This was just used for testing purposes. But we are going to be talking about the Drakethroat Glaive in a minute, as I feel like that's pretty obvious. So let's get into the weapons first. Our main weapon, and this is where there's a lot of variance here. So our main weapon is Kerwin's Cauterizer. Now, Kerwin's Cauterizer is the weapon you kind of want to aim for with this build, in my opinion. It is an Act 3 weapon, so I'll be going over some alternatives in a minute, but this weapon does come with a lot of unique utility that we want, specifically for constant 1d4 of fire damage, giving us a solid option for fire damage already, but then also on a hit it's going to inflict the burning status condition on a constitution save, which is super awesome. That means we're going to be able to throw around status effects and be able to debilitate our opponents with burning, which, if you don't know, means that the target is going to take an extra 1d4 fire damage per turn. It's a +1 weapon overall, which may seem a bit weak, especially for Act 3, but again, since we have the Drakethroat Glaive, if I quickly equip this, and then drop the Cauterizer on the floor, cast Draconic Elemental Weapon Lightning, you will see that we now have a lightning imbued, if it will show the cool aura effect. Yes, the blue and the red looks awesome. We now have a +2 weapon that deals 1d4 fire, 1d4 lightning, and yes, a bit of acid damage because we're using the Caustic Band, in addition to its regular weapon damage, making it quite a powerful option. And we're also, but here's a few other options you could go with. In Act 1, if you wanted to go for a more strength-orientated build, like, for example, dumping Dex a bit more, maybe dumping Charisma, putting more points into Strength, grabbing Tavern Brawler and, the Potion of Everlasting Vigor to bump it up to 20, you could go with the Everburn Blade, which does look awesome when buffed with Elemental Weapon. You kind of get the lightning and the fire. And again, you can get this literally in the tutorial area of the game, so it is a solid option. Again, you will have to finagle your stats around a bit, and you are going to have to make sacrifices to make the two-handed weapons work. But between the Everburn Blade and the Hellfire Great Axe, which you can get in Act 3, it might actually be worth it and would look super cool. The Hellfire Great Axe in particular does an extra 1d6 of fire damage, and is a +2 weapon, meaning that with the Draconic Elemental Weapon buff, in fact, I could show that off for you right now, because I actually have a second glaive here. Let me show you. Check this shit out. This is cool. You get this like lightning-infused flaming axe, which is going to deal 1d6 fire damage plus 1d4 lightning damage and becomes a +3 weapon. And whenever you deal damage with it, you gain heat. Now, what heat can do is you take 1 to 4 fire damage each turn, but can use heat convergence, meaning that for every turn of heat you have, you can expend those charges to deal an additional 1 fire damage for every charge on your next fire attack. I'm going to be honest, this is not that great. Everyone tells me that they really, really like the heat mechanic, but I can't personally understand why. Because you're going to be taking damage every turn, and that damage will stack up for the chance to do a little bit of extra damage on a very specific elemental attack. So, in my opinion, it's not great, but you will be able to use that extra damage, and look at this looks cool. So again, if you want to try your hand at a strength variant using Tavern Brawler and the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, go right ahead, but I wanted to do a more dex-oriented version because I feel like it is more versatile and is easier to build overall. And again, gives us access to a cool combo that we wouldn't otherwise have. That being the ability to use a shield, and that is the real Sparky Sparkwall. A +2 to our armor class is nice, giving us a final total of 20, which is awesome, but it's going to give us the unique ability Lightning Aura. Consume 3 lightning charges to release a blast of electricity that damages and jolts enemies. This can be used once per long rest, which may not seem like a lot, but the effect we get is worth it. So you're going to deal a 1d6 lightning damage on the initial burst, and then with each subsequent turn for the enemies that are in the range, they're going to be jolted, meaning that they're going to take an extra 1d4 of lightning damage each turn, meaning you get to stack on that fire and lightning damage quite hard. But how are we building lightning charges? Well, I just bumped my desk. The primary way of doing it is through the speedy light feat. When the wearer dashes or takes a similar action during combat, they gain 3 lightning charges, meaning that all you have to do to be able to activate this ability is click this button. And then you instantly have 3 lightning charges for the cost of one of your 2 bonus actions, and then you can immediately activate Lightning Aura. You do also have the access to the Sparkle Hands here, meaning that if you wanted to use something like Flurry of Blows, or maybe even Fangs of the Fire Snake, if that counts, you could immediately gain more lightning charges, but this is more of a... This is overkill. You could put any other gloves in this slot, perhaps even something like the Gloves of Belligerent Skies if you wanted to throw in Reverberation, or if you wanted to build the more strength-orientated version, go with the Gloves of Dexterity to bump up your dex, to allow you to dump dex, to bump your strength, but it's entirely up to you. So yeah, obviously building lightning charges is going to allow us to do extra damage, because if you don't know, lightning charges on their own give you a +1 bonus to attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage while you have them on, and when you gain 5 charges, the next time you deal damage, you deal an additional 1d8 lightning damage, meaning that as long as you use your one button free lightning charges gain per turn, basically getting to just power up anime style once per turn, you're going to be able to get a ton of lightning charges, meaning you're consistently between Fangs of the Fire Snake and your lightning charges and your weapon buffs, you're going to be consistently doing massive amounts of fire and lightning damage with every single attack, allowing you to eventually go for big burst damage as well once you get those extra charges and manage to do those big attacks. As for the rest of the equipment, I've gone with the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Turns out, you know how it says when you inflict a condition you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds? You can do this with conditions you inflict on yourself. So whenever you gain lightning charges, you also gain Arcane Synergy. And Arcane Synergy is going to deal additional damage equal to the affected entity's spellcasting ability modifier. At 16 Wisdom, that is going to be a +3 to every single attack we do, which is awesome. So worth having on. As for our cloak, I've gone with the Cindermoth Cloak. A creature that damages the wearer within 2 meters receives burning, meaning we can just burn enemies at melee range, which is awesome. And for our armor piece, I've gone with the Flame Enameled Armor. You can get these in Act... You can get this in Act 3, but I will have an Act 1 alternative. You gain a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, awesome. You have resistance to fire damage and a +2 bonus to saving throws, awesome. But the main thing we get from this is a decent chunk of armor class, that being 16, and this is medium armor, so it gets pumped up with our dex. But we are going to be able to get Fire Shield, allowing us to combine our aura that we get from lightning with Fire Shield to create a lightning fire aura that is going to deal both types of damage to anyone who gets close to us. Super, super awesome and extremely on theme. You're going to see in the combat footage that this looks and plays fucking awesome. Like, you're really going to enjoy this. But if you want a similar effect in Act 1, since we are a monk, we can pick up the Infernal Robe. This is going to allow us to get Fire Shield as well, and a +1 to our armor class, and it's only clothing, so we can use it with a monk. It doesn't work with a shield, and unfortunately things like the Speedy Light Feet are medium armor, so you are going to have to, like, I've just got the Boots of Speed here, so you are going to have to change things around in the early game, so you could get something like the Boots of Speed to be able to dash as a bonus action. But you can still get a decent chunk of armor class out of it, but, you know, once you get, like, the shield and the armor that you want, even with your higher dexterity, even though you're not getting an armored defense, you're still getting a lot of AC, so, you know, play around with it. So yeah, the Infernal Robe is a solid Act 1 option. Yes, you can get this in a good aligned run, you just have to know how to kind of manipulate the system. And if you want that one-handed option to use the shield, but you don't before Act 3, so you can also use the Thermodynamo Axe. Now, this is an option you can get early on in Act 2. It has the same effect as the Hellfire Great Axe to generate heat when you deal damage, but it does not have any innate elemental damage, so you are going to have to buff it with the Draconic Elemental Weapon with either Fire or Lightning. You're going to have to choose, but it is still a cool enough weapon to showcase, and it's a good, and if you want to go with the one-handed variant, it's a good substitute for the Cauterizer until you get it. So yeah, the accessories. I've gone with the Sentient Amulet because it's going to give us another means of getting key restoration, allowing us to restore a number of key points equal to your martial arts die. For us, that's a 6, so that's basically all of our key points. It's also going to allow us to cast Shatter, which is a thunder spell, which, you know, thunder and lightning, it felt on theme. You can get this as early as Act 1, but it is a weakened version. However, you can upgrade it to this version in Act 3. Like I said before, I went with the Caustic Band, just because there wasn't anything else I really wanted in this slot, so this is honestly interchangeable, but since we're doing a lot of attacks with things like, you know, our extra attack and such, we might as well get that extra little bit of acid damage. And I've also gone with the Sparks Wall, meaning we can't be electrocuted, so if we do end up creating this electrified water surfaces, we're not going to be harmed by them, and this also grants us resistance to lightning damage, meaning we are resistant to fire, lightning, and cold, which makes a ton of sense for this build. But as for that cold resistance, we're getting that from the Dark Fire Shortbow, giving us a ranged option and the ability to cast Haste once per long rest. As a monk, Haste is broken, so I'm so glad we have the opportunity to get it, allowing us to just do massive amounts of damage. So yeah, I believe that is everything. With the weapons and the equipment that we have a really solid setup. The kind of loop you want to go for is, you know, you cast maybe Haste at the start of the round, then, you know, get your lightning charges, get Fire Shield and your lightning aura up, and then cycle in your Fangs of the Fire Snake with your weapon attacks to deal massive fire and lightning damage on each of your turns. Again, the combat footage we'll be playing now, you're going to see exactly how this build works, and it's incredible. It looks cool, it feels fun to play. You're going to be doing a ton of damage. You're a really powerful frontline fighter, but can also do stuff at range as well. And again, you even get to stack things on like sneak attack, like I said. You're going to have a ton of fun. You have enough charisma and enough, you know, proficiencies and, you know, things like guidance as well to feel good in as the main face of the party as well. And you're also, again, going to be getting those like reaction counter attacks as well with the Wrath of the Storm, which is super, super fun. So overall, this build has a ton of versatility to it, a really, really cool theming, and it's just going to deal tons of damage. So let's get into the end of video stuff now. Apologies for no video yesterday. I was super busy and it was kind of a big day for me, so I was a bit tired, but we're all good now and I should be able to get back to a regular upload schedule. I actually do have an extra day off this week, so I may be able to pre-record a bunch of videos in a row to in a single day to basically give myself a bit more free time as well. Other news, not really much to go off of. I'm still getting through the build request backlog, as you can see. But the interesting thing I did do, I posted on my community post tab about it earlier. I've actually purchased, and I'm ready to play, because thank you Steam Autumn Sale, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Now, this was one of the games that was recommended to me that it might be a good idea to also try doing build videos for, or perhaps just content in general. So if any of you are interested in seeing Pathfinder builds, obviously I'm going to have to play through the game first and kind of get used to the system, but let me know if that's something you would be interested in the very distant future. So yeah, Pathfinder. Interesting system. Looking forward to it. Oh, also this Saturday, since there won't be a regular upload on Saturday, I have actually gone ahead and quickly edited together and scheduled for release a highlight reel of the recent Blue Mage stream. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's going to be a really fun one. Again, I'm not going to be able to do a build video on that day, so giving you guys something a little bit extra for the weekend I felt like was pretty nice. And then lastly, again, I guess on the topic of streams, not entirely sure when the next stream is going to be. It won't be this weekend, but I will see if I can do one next weekend. Saturday, 7 PM UK time, so same time as last time, because again, I really want to continue streaming because it was so fun last time. Anyways, I do think that is going to do it for me. I will see you all next time, and I hope you have a good one.